The galaxy was wide, filled with countless stars, and yet humanity had only begun to take its first real steps beyond its home system. Ships of steel and fire carried men and women farther than any of their ancestors dreamed. Some worlds were barren, some hostile, but a few were home to alien races with long histories and powerful cultures. Among them was the proud race of the Zerani. The Zerani were tall, graceful beings with silver skin that shimmered faintly under light. Their eyes were larger than human eyes, glowing softly with colors that shifted like gems. They were old, older than human history, and they had built cities that floated in the air and towers that touched the clouds. To them, humans were still children who had only recently left their cradle. It was to these people that Paul, a young human explorer, was sent. Paul had been chosen as part of a small, diplomatic group whose goal was to build ties and cooperation with the Zerani. He was not the leader of the group, but he was curious, stubborn, and willing to learn. His commanders believed these traits might help in a culture that valued strength and persistence. The station of the Zerani floated above a blue-green planet, glowing like a jewel in the dark. When the human ship docked, Paul looked out of the viewport and saw alien ships that curved like the wings of birds. The Zerani design was elegant, flowing like art, while the human ships were still rough, heavy, and practical. Paul felt a strange pride in the difference. Humans had built their ships with sweat and grit, not endless centuries of tradition. When the humans entered the station, they were greeted by Zerani guards. The air was clean and slightly sweet, and the walls glowed softly with light that came from no lamp. The Zerani council members were waiting, tall and calm, their faces unreadable. Among them stood a woman named Arya. She was not a soldier or a council member. She was a scientist, a master of Zerani genetics. Her task was to study humans, to measure their bodies, and to record their strengths and weaknesses. She believed she already knew the answer. Humans were fragile. To her, they were creatures that broke easily, grew old quickly, and acted with reckless emotion. Arya was chosen to work closely with Paul. The choice surprised him, but he greeted her with the polite bow he had practiced. "Honored to meet you," Paul said. His voice was calm, though inside he felt a bit nervous. Arya looked at him with cool eyes. Her silver skin caught the light, and her robe of white shimmered faintly. "We will see if your honor matches your results," she replied. From the start, their partnership was uneasy. Arya spoke with precision, as if every word was measured. Paul asked questions, sometimes too many, sometimes too curious. When Arya showed him Zerani machines that could read the very strands of life, he leaned forward with wide eyes like a child staring at fire. She thought him unrefined. He thought her proud. Their first task was simple. Arya wanted to take samples of human cells to compare with Zerani samples. She explained the process, her tone sharp, as if teaching a careless student. Paul listened carefully, repeating the steps back to her. She seemed slightly annoyed that he did not make mistakes. "Your species is young," she told him. "You burn fast, live short lives, and change too quickly. Our kind has stability. We are balanced. That is why we lead the Council of Systems." Paul gave a small smile. "Maybe balance is good, but sometimes change is what helps you survive. When the ground shakes, the tree that bends does not break." Arya narrowed her eyes. She had not expected such words from him. "You speak like a philosopher," she said, though her tone carried no warmth. "I just speak like a human," Paul replied. For several days they worked in the lab together. Arya handled the machines, graceful in her movements, her hands flowing over controls that looked like crystal panels. Paul prepared samples, his large hands careful despite their size. At first, they spoke little beyond what was needed. But slowly, Paul began to ask questions. "How long do your people live?" he asked one day. "Centuries," Arya answered. "Our bodies do not weaken quickly." "Ow!" Paul whistled softly. "That's a long time. On Earth, if someone reaches 100 years, we already see it as amazing, and you truly are fragile," she said. Her voice sharp, or maybe Paul replied, "It makes every year more precious." Arya did not answer, but for a brief moment her eyes flickered with something he could not read. Later, while Arya studied the samples, Paul leaned close to watch the screen. "So that's my code," he said, pointing at the twisting strands of light. "Yes," Arya said, almost dismissively. "Chaotic and messy. Yet somehow it holds together." Paul laughed. "Messy is another word for flexible. We survive by adapting. If it is too hot, we learn to live in deserts. If it is too cold, we learn to live on ice. We do not need perfect design. We need the will to keep going." Arya turned to face him, her eyes narrowing again. "You speak as though humans are stronger than us." "Not stronger," Paul said carefully. "Just different. But different can be powerful." The words hung in the air. Arya returned to her work, but she did so in silence. In the evenings, Paul walked the station alone, watching the Zerani move with their elegant steps. He saw their children learning from glowing screens, their elders speaking in voices that carried authority. Everything about them seemed calm, controlled, and balanced. Yet he also noticed something else. Few of them laughed. Few of them shouted. They were like a river that flowed smoothly, but never rushed. Paul thought of Earth. He thought of cities loud with sound, people arguing, laughing, crying, and building. Humanity was messy, yes, but alive. He wondered if the Zerani ever envied that. On the 5th day of his stay, Paul and Arya were called to meet a council elder. The elder was tall, his silver skin marked with faint glowing lines. He asked them to present their progress. Arya spoke first. "We have begun collecting data. The human genetic code is as expected. It is unstable, prone to rapid change, and inefficient." Paul stood quietly listening. He wanted to speak but waited until the elder looked at him. "And what do you say, human?" The elder asked. Paul took a breath. "Our code may look unstable, but it is also strong. It changes because we face change every day. We survive storms, plagues, hunger, and even our own mistakes. If our code looks chaotic, it is because we are made to keep moving forward, no matter what stands in our way." The elder studied him with unreadable eyes. Then he nodded once. "We will see," he said, before dismissing them. After the meeting, Arya walked beside Paul in silence. Finally, she spoke. "You should not have spoken so boldly." "Why not?" Paul asked. "The council does not like arrogance." "It wasn't arrogance," Paul replied. "It was truth." Arya glanced at him, her expression hard. Yet somewhere deep within her, a small thought began to grow. Could it be that humans were not fragile children, but something else entirely? For now, she dismissed the thought, but she could not ignore the strange feeling that this human was not what she expected. The lab was quiet when they returned, but inside both of them a storm of questions was beginning to rise. The laboratory aboard the Zerani station was unlike anything Paul had ever seen before. The walls curved in gentle arcs, glowing with a soft silver-blue light that seemed alive. Crystals floated in the air, turning slowly. And whenever Arya touched one with her graceful hands, the light shifted and screens appeared. It was science so advanced that it looked like magic. Paul stood in the center of the room, staring with wide eyes. His boots felt heavy on the smooth floor, and he felt like a miner who had stepped into a palace. He reminded himself to keep calm. He was here to represent humanity, not to gape like a tourist. Arya moved around the lab as if she were part of it. Her white robe shimmered with faint blue threads that seemed to respond to the light around her. Every motion she made was precise, controlled. She hardly looked at Paul as she began preparing for their next stage of research. "Today we run a direct compatibility test." Her voice was clear but cold. "We have your samples. Now we will see how they react when exposed to Zerani biological patterns." Paul tilted his head. "Compatibility, you mean? Like how our bodies match up?" "Precisely," Arya replied. She tapped a floating crystal and a series of holographic strands appeared. They twisted and sparkled like ribbons of light. "Our kind has long believed that our code is too refined to interact with others. We adapt slowly but remain stable. Your kind, however, mutates rapidly. This will prove that you are chaotic." Paul stepped closer to watch. The glowing strands fascinated him. He pointed to the red strand that represented human code. "That's me?" "Yes," Arya said flatly. "A messy web. Your cells fight each other as often as they work together." Paul chuckled softly. "Maybe, but we survive." Arya ignored the comment. She guided the red human strand toward the silver Zerani strand. The two twisted near each other on the holographic display, glowing more brightly when they touched. At first, Arya expected rejection. She thought the strands would push apart, unstable and mismatched. But instead, something different happened. The strands began to merge. Paul leaned forward. "Is that supposed to happen?" Arya's hand froze over the control crystal. Her silver-blue eyes widened slightly, a rare crack in her calm mask. "No," she said firmly. "This is not correct. The system must be misreading the data." She adjusted the controls, running the test again. But the result was the same. The red and silver strands did not reject each other. They wrapped together, stronger, brighter, forming new shapes that pulsed with energy. Paul's heart pounded. He had no deep training in genetics, but he could tell this was significant. "So, we fit," he said quietly. Arya turned sharply, glaring at him. "Do not use simple words for this. It is an anomaly. An error. Or maybe it's the truth," Paul answered. Arya's lips pressed into a thin line. She ran more scans, faster now, as if racing against the evidence. Every test repeated the same result. Human and Zerani codes did not repel each other. Instead, they supported each other, forming something new. The scientist inside Arya was furious. For centuries, Zerani believed they were beyond such connections. To think that a young species, barely crawling among the stars, could interact with them in ways even their elders could not, was insulting. Her pride resisted the data. But the data was clear. Paul watched her in silence, reading her frustration. He spoke softly. "Maybe our chaos is not weakness. Maybe it is strength." Arya turned on him sharply. "You speak as if you have achieved victory. Do not fool yourself. This proves nothing." "It proves something," Paul insisted, his voice steady. "It proves that we are not as fragile as your people think. We are built to connect, to survive, to mix with the unknown. That's why we reach the stars, even without perfection." Arya glared, but she could not find the words to dismiss him. Her heart was unsettled, and that angered her even more. For the next few days, they repeated the tests. Arya brought in new machines, stronger analyzers, and even samples from other Zerani subjects for comparison. Each time the results were the same. Human code adapted, bent, and found a way to merge. While Zerani code remained rigid unless human strands were present, the whispers began soon after. Other scientists heard rumors of unusual data. They looked at Paul with suspicion and curiosity. Some believed it was a mistake, while others thought it was dangerous. The Zerani valued control. And here was proof that humans could change what even the Zerani could not. One evening, after another long day in the lab, Paul sat on a bench near the observation window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. He thought of Earth, of the endless struggle of his people, of families that lived and died in just a handful of decades. He wondered what his ancestors would say if they knew their messy. Human code could shake the beliefs of an ancient race. Arya entered silently. She stood beside him, her gaze on the stars. For a moment, she did not speak. Then she asked, "Why do you not fear this?" Paul looked at her, surprised by the question. "Fear what?" "This," she said sharply. "The merging. The unknown. My people see danger in it. They see corruption of order." Paul smiled faintly. "Because that's what humans do. We step into danger. We don't know how to live without it. We fight storms, we climb mountains, we dive into seas. Sometimes we fall, sometimes we fail, but sometimes we discover something new. Fear doesn't stop us. It pushes us forward." Arya studied him, her eyes narrowing as if searching for weakness. But she found only calm determination. For the first time, she felt a strange unease. Perhaps humans were not fragile. Perhaps they were something even more dangerous and predictable survivors. The next day, Arya prepared a larger experiment. She wanted absolute proof. She connected a deeper analysis system, one that simulated real biological interaction at a cellular level. Paul agreed to participate, trusting her expertise. The machine glowed as it began its work. Paul sat inside a glass chamber, his arm connected to sleek silver lines that hummed with energy. Arya monitored the results, her eyes fixed on the data streams vast. The machine processed the information, simulating contact between human and Zerani biology. Suddenly the graph spiked. Energy levels rose sharply. The system beeped with alarms, but not from danger from activity. Human code was not only merging, it was thriving. Arya's hands tightened on the controls. Her heart raced, though her face remained calm. She whispered to herself, "Impossible." Paul's voice came through the chamber. "What's happening?" Arya hesitated. Then, with a sharp breath, she answered, You are rewriting the system." Paul blinked, confused. "Rewriting? Your code adapts so quickly it forces the Zerani code to follow. It changes the rules. It makes new patterns. No one has ever done this. No other species has done this." Paul's mouth curved into a small smile. "Maybe that's humanity's gift. We don't fit into rules. We make new ones." Arya turned away from him, hiding her expression. She felt a storm inside her chest. Outrage, disbelief, and something else she could not name. This human was undoing everything she believed about her people's superiority. When the test ended, the results were undeniable. The system displayed a bright new strand of merged code, stronger and more flexible than either human or Zerani alone. Arya dismissed Paul quickly, telling him she needed time to review. Alone in the lab, she stared at the glowing strand. Her pride screamed at her to reject it. Yet her scientific mind whispered that this was a discovery greater than anything in centuries. She clenched her fists, her silver skin shimmering under the lab's light. "This cannot be," she whispered. "And yet, it is." Paul, walking back to his quarters, felt a surge of quiet triumph. He did not fully understand the science, but he understood the meaning. Humanity had once again proven itself. Not through weapons, not through power, but through the simple strength of being human, adaptable, unstoppable, impossible to ignore. What neither of them realized was that this discovery would soon shake not just a laboratory, but the entire council of the Zerani. The next morning, the Zerani laboratory was unusually quiet. Even the hum of the machines seemed softer, as though the station itself was holding its breath. News of the unusual experiment had spread among the scientists overnight, and whispers floated through the halls like invisible threads. Everyone knew something remarkable had occurred. Arya moved quickly through the lab, her mind racing. Her silver skin seemed paler in the soft light, her eyes sharper than usual. She could not ignore what had happened the day before. The human code had merged with Zerani patterns. Not just merged, but improved them, creating sequences stronger than any Zerani had ever recorded. It was impossible. It went against centuries of science and tradition. She clenched her fists. No one could know she was shaken. She could not allow the council to see weakness in her work, nor could she allow Paul to think he had somehow bested her. The human was reckless, bold, spelled, and strangely competent in ways she had never expected. Paul arrived shortly after her, carrying a small satchel of data tablets. He greeted her politely. "Good morning, Arya. Are you ready to review yesterday's results?" Arya's lips pressed into a thin line. "I am always ready. But this is not about results. This is about the process. You were careless, human. You may not understand the consequences of your actions." Paul frowned slightly. "I followed your instructions exactly." Arya's eyes narrowed. "You always follow your own path. It seems your nature cannot resist it. That is why this anomaly occurred." Paul raised an eyebrow. "Anomaly or discovery?" Arya glared but said nothing. Her pride battled with logic. The proof was right there in the glowing strands on her screens. Human code had acted in ways even she could not have predicted. Their confrontation was interrupted when the station's communication panel chimed. A council messenger appeared, his tall frame radiating authority. "Arya," he said formally, "the council demands a full report of your experiments with the human. They wish to review your findings immediately." Arya's heart sank, though she hid it behind her calm demeanor. "Understood," she said curtly. As she prepared the data, Paul followed silently. He sensed the tension in her more than he had before. The council was strict, their judgments severe. If the results of the experiment reached them as they were, it could provoke anger, disbelief, or worse. When they arrived at the council chamber, the room was vast and intimidating. Zerani elders, tall and elegant, stood along the perimeter. Their eyes glowed faintly, a sign of both attention and authority. Arya stepped forward, her chest stiff, and began her presentation. "The experiment," she started, "was intended to test compatibility between human and Zerani biological systems. All protocols were followed. The human subject, Paul, responded according to expected parameters. However, she paused, choosing her words carefully. The chamber was silent. Paul felt the weight of hundreds of centuries of Zerani tradition pressing down. However, Arya continued, the results exceeded expectations. The human code merged with Zerani sequences, creating new patterns of strength and stability. This was not predicted, nor is it replicable with any other species tested. A murmur ran through the council. Some elders exchanged glances. Others stared at Paul with a mixture of curiosity and concern. One elder, a tall figure with glowing emerald eyes, stepped forward. "You mean to say," he asked slowly, "that a human has altered our biological system simply by participating in an experiment?" "Yes," Arya said firmly. "The system confirms it." Another elder shook his head. "This is dangerous. Such instability cannot be allowed. We value control and tradition above all else. How can we trust that this human will not disrupt more than your tests?" Paul stood calmly. "I only followed the instructions. My goal was to understand and cooperate. Humans survive by learning and adapting. We do not destroy without purpose." Arya felt her frustration spike. He was calm, polite, and composed, while the council questioned him with suspicion. Her anger mixed with admiration, though she refused to acknowledge it. The council deliberated for hours. They questioned Arya repeatedly, asking if she had manipulated results, if the systems had failed, if Paul had any unique abilities unknown to Zerani science. Arya insisted the tests were controlled. Paul answered every question honestly. Finally, one elder leaned forward. "Your species is unpredictable," he said. "We may have underestimated humans. We may have believed them fragile, but this evidence suggests otherwise." Arya's chest tightened. She had expected anger, perhaps punishment for the anomaly, but not acknowledgement. Recognition of human strength was something she had not anticipated. When the council adjourned, the whispers among the Zerani scientists intensified. Many were stunned. The human had not only survived, but he had demonstrated a capacity no Zerani had anticipated. Arya followed Paul back to the lab, silent. Once they were alone, she turned sharply. "Do you understand what you have done?" she demanded. "I understand that our experiment succeeded," Paul said carefully. "I followed your instructions. You said to test compatibility." "That is what happened," Arya paced, her mind racing. "No human has ever triggered such a reaction. This is not just success. It is outrage. It challenges everything we believe about order, about superiority. You are reckless, careless, and remarkable." Paul studied her quietly. "I do not intend to offend. I only did what humans do best. Adapt. You adapt too well," she snapped. "And you have done it to me, to our biology, to our research." She stopped herself, realizing she was on the edge of saying something she could not take back. Paul nodded slowly. "I did not mean to cause harm. I meant to learn, to contribute, to prove that humans are capable." Arya stared at him, her anger mingling with something she did not fully understand. Part of her wanted to scold him, to demand answers, to protect her pride. Yet another part recognized the truth. Humans were not fragile. Humans could change what even the strongest, oldest races could not. "I need time," she said finally. "Time to review, time to think. This cannot go to the council until I understand it fully." Paul bowed slightly. "I will wait." As Arya returned to her station, she examined the glowing strands again. Her anger simmered, but she could not deny the data. The human code had merged, creating a system stronger than Zerani alone. She clenched her fists. "This cannot be allowed to remain unchecked," she whispered. Yet even as she said it, she felt a strange respect for the human who had caused it. Later that evening, Arya walked the observation deck alone. Paul had gone to his quarters, giving her space. She gazed at the stars, thinking of humanity's resilience, their courage, their unpredictability. For centuries, the Zerani had believed themselves superior. Yet here was a single human, standing calmly in a galaxy that was older and more powerful than he could imagine. And proving them wrong without even trying, she clenched her hands, her silver skin catching the light. "I will not admit it yet," she murmured. "But humans? They are stronger than we believed." Paul, sitting in his quarters, reviewed the experiment notes. He did not fully understand the science, but he felt the thrill of discovery. Humanity had once again proven its value, not through power or war, but through its persistence, adaptability. Encouraged as sleep came that night, both human and Zerani scientists were filled with thoughts they could not ignore. The experiment had succeeded, but its consequences were far from clear. Arya's outrage simmered beneath her calm exterior, and Paul's quiet confidence began to feel like a spark that could ignite change far beyond the walls of the laboratory. By morning, the station would be buzzing with speculation. The council would demand answers. And Arya would have to face the reality that her carefully constructed world had been shaken by a human. The storm was only beginning, and somewhere deep in her mind, Arya could not deny the truth. Humans were not fragile. They were extraordinary. The station hummed with quiet energy as Arya returned to the lab the next morning. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions, doubts, and curiosity. She could not ignore what had happened. The human, Paul, had triggered a reaction she could barely explain. His DNA had interacted with hers in ways that defied Zerani expectations, and the council's whispers of doubt and curiosity only made her more determined too. Understand the truth, Paul was already there, reviewing data from the previous experiments. He glanced up and offered a polite nod. "Good morning, Arya. Are you ready to continue?" Arya hesitated. "I am ready," she said carefully. She could feel her anger simmering beneath the surface, but she had to maintain control. "But this time, I will oversee every step. You will follow my instructions precisely." Paul smiled faintly. As always, for the next several hours, they worked together. Arya monitored every detail of the experiment, her eyes darting between the machines and the glowing strands of code. Paul remained calm, assisting with care, his curiosity always tempered by respect. As they progressed, Arya noticed something extraordinary. Human DNA was not just merging with Zerni codate, was influencing it. The rigid patterns of the Zerani sequences began to flex, creating new arrangements that were both stable and adaptable. This was impossible by Zerani standards. Nothing in their recorded history suggested that a species so young could influence their biology in this way. Arya's frustration deepened. Her mind rebelled against the evidence. "It cannot be," she muttered. "Humans are supposed to be fragile, weak, dependent on luck and chance. Yet this is precise, controlled, and strong." Paul looked up at her, sensing the turmoil in her voice. "Strength is not always obvious, Arya. Sometimes it comes from the ability to survive, to adapt, to face challenges without giving up." She turned sharply toward him. "You speak as if you are the teacher and I am the student." Paul shook his head. "I speak as a human, and sometimes the truth is easier to see from outside." Arya clenched her fists, fighting both anger and admiration. She wanted to reject him, to dismiss the results, to tell herself that this was an anomaly. But she could not. Every scan, every simulation, every strand of merged code confirmed it. The truth was undeniable. Humans were stronger than the Zerani had ever imagined. As the day went on, Arya ran a series of advanced tests. She wanted to understand why this happened, how it happened, and if it could be replicated. The machines showed that human adaptability was not chaotic at all. It was precise, focused, and incredibly efficient. Where Zerani code remained fixed and predictable, human code could bend, respond, and improve. Arya leaned back in her chair, stunned. She had spent her entire life believing in the perfection of Zerani biology. She had studied generations of her people, learned every nuance, and yet here was a human so simple, so seemingly fragile, producing results that no Zerani could match. Paul watched her quietly. "You look surprised," he said gently. "I am," she admitted, her voice soft but firm. "I do not understand how it is possible. Your species, it defies every expectation we have." Paul smiled. "Humans have always survived against the odds. We don't need perfection to succeed. We need determination, courage, and the will to keep going." Arya shook her head. "That may be true for survival, but this is more than survival. You are changing the patterns of life itself. You are rewriting biology, not just adapting to it." "Maybe that is the gift of humanity," Paul said quietly. "We don't just survive, we find ways to improve, to grow, to create something new, even when everything seems impossible." Arya stared at him, a strange feeling stirring inside. For centuries, the Zerani had looked down on humans as fragile, weak, and unworthy. Yet here was one human, showing her a truth she could no longer deny. Humans were not weak. They were extraordinary. The next stage of the experiment involved more direct interaction. Arya prepared the machinery to simulate real-world biological compatibility at a deeper level. Paul agreed to participate fully, trusting her guidance. As the process began, the machines hummed with energy, and the chamber glowed softly around them. For the first time, Arya noticed a change within herself. As her code interacted with Paul's, she felt a subtle shift, a new energy flowing through her own system. It was neither dangerous nor uncomfortable, but undeniable. The machines confirmed it. The human DNA was affecting her biology in ways no Zerani had ever experienced. She felt a flicker of fear, but it was quickly replaced by awe. This is incredible," she whispered. "It should not be possible." Paul looked at her calmly. "Nothing is impossible if you are willing to adapt, to accept change, and to embrace it." Arya turned away, hiding the thought that humans might indeed be superior in this way. Her pride would not allow her to admit it fully. Yet the evidence continued to mount. Human adaptability was more than survival, it was evolution in real time, a force the Zerani had never understood. As they worked late into the night, Arya ran one final simulation. The results were staggering. The human DNA did more than merge, enhanced, improved, and stabilized the Zerani patterns. It created a system that was stronger, more flexible, and more capable than either species alone. Arya felt a mixture of emotions: fear, respect, disbelief, and a strange sense of excitement. This was not just a scientific breakthrough. It was a challenge to everything the Zerani believed. Their long-held assumptions of superiority, stability, and perfection were being rewritten by a species they had once dismissed as fragile. She finally turned to Paul, her eyes glowing faintly in the soft light. "I see it now," she said. "Humans, they are not weak. They are not fragile. They are remarkable." Paul nodded quietly. "You have to admit it now, Arya. Strength is not always measured by how long you live or how controlled you are. Sometimes it is measured by how much you can endure, how much you can change, and how much you can create." Arya clenched her fists, a mix of frustration and admiration swirling inside her. "I will not tell the council yet," she said, her voice firm. "They will not understand. They will see this as chaos, as a threat. But you have shown me something I cannot ignore. Humans are more than I ever believed." Paul smiled, his quiet confidence shining through. "And that is why we survive. Not because we are perfect, but because we are willing to change, to learn, and to keep moving forward." The first time, Arya felt a sense of respect and something deeper, something she could not name for this human standing calmly beside her. He had not fought her. He had not challenged her with words or weapons. He had simply shown her a truth so profound that it shook her beliefs to the core. As the night drew on, Arya returned to her quarters, still thinking of the results. The human had not only survived, he had transformed her understanding of life itself. She knew that when the Council learned of this, the galaxy would change. Human potential could no longer be ignored, and deep inside, quiet thought took root. Maybe humans were not just adaptable, they were extraordinary. Maybe their resilience, their courage, and their willingness to embrace the unknown was a gift that no alien species, no matter how advanced, could match. As Arya drifted into a restless sleep, she could not help but wonder what the Council would do, what her people would say, and how this human would continue to prove that humanity was far stronger than anyone had ever imagined. The truth was clear. Humans were not fragile. Humans were unstoppable, and for the first time, Arya realized that she had underestimated them. The great chamber was filled with a strange light. The relic shone brighter than ever before. The carvings on the walls glowed like fire running through veins of stone. The alien council, dressed in long silver robes, stood speechless. Their eyes were wide, and their voices whispered in disbelief. They had watched countless warriors try for years, and all had failed. Yet the human had touched it once, and the relic had answered. Raffi stood in the center, calm but a little nervous. He did not feel powerful. He only felt a little warmth from the relic under his hand. To him, it was simple. He had trusted himself, and he had not doubted. He did not understand why it had worked, but he knew it was not a trick. Vera was furious. Her wings twitched with anger, and her sharp tail cut small marks into the stone floor as she paced. She had tried this relic many times. She had trained harder than anyone. She had been told from childhood that she was destined to control it one day. And yet this fragile-looking human, with no wings and no fangs, had done what she could not. "Impossible," she said at last, her voice breaking in the great hall. "It is a lie. He must have cheated. The relic would never accept such a weak being." Raffi turned to her. He did not smile. He did not look proud. He simply said in a soft voice, "I did not cheat. I only placed my hand where you asked me to." Maybe it was not about power. Maybe it was about something else, the council members began to murmur. One elder stepped forward. His eyes were deep green, and his horns curved with age. He spoke in a heavy tone. "The relic has its own will. It cannot be tricked. It tests the heart and the spirit. If it answered him, then it saw something worthy." Vera could not accept it. Her pride burned hotter than fire. "He is not worthy. He is only human. He comes from a small world, a weak people. They have no empire, no great fleets. How can this relic choose him over my people?" Another elder raised her hand. "Perhaps this is the message of the relic. That strength is not always where we expect it. That greatness may rise from those we ignore." The room grew silent again. The relic itself pulsed brighter, and then a strange thing happened. Images filled the air. They were not clear like pictures, but moving shadows of light. The council gasped. They saw shapes of humans and aliens together, building, exploring, fighting side by side. They saw the stars filled with ships that carried banners of both races. They saw a time of unity, not conquest. Raffi watched in awe. He did not understand all of it, but he felt a weight on his chest. This was not just about him. It was about something larger, something waiting in the future. When the images faded, the chamber was quiet. The elders lowered their heads, whispering words of respect, but Vera still struggled. Her fists tightened. Her eyes burned. She wanted to scream. She wanted to challenge Raffi in combat, to prove her strength another way. Yet something stopped her. She looked at him and she did not see arrogance. She saw a man who stood steady, without pride, without fear. That steadiness hurt her more than any blade could. Finally, she spoke, her voice lower, filled with bitterness. "Do you feel proud, human? Do you feel that you have defeated me?" Rafi shook his head. "No, I do not think of it as defeating you. I only think of it as doing what I was asked. If the relic chose me, then it was not because I am greater than you. It was because it wanted to teach something, maybe even to me." Her eyes widened a little at those words. She had expected him to gloat. She had expected him to boast. But he had not. He had taken no pleasure in her failure. That confused her more than the relic's choice. The council spoke again. "The prophecy has begun. The relic has chosen a path. From this day, humanity will no longer be seen as weak. They will stand among us." One by one, the council bowed their heads toward Rafi. He felt uncomfortable. He had never been bowed to before. He was just an explorer, just a man who wanted to see other stars. Now he stood as a symbol of something far greater. Vera watched in silence. Her anger was still there, but it began to mix with something else. A strange respect, though she did not want to admit it. She knew now that she had to face a truth she did not like. The universe was changing, and humans were part of that change. Later, when the chamber was empty, Vera stood alone with Rafi. The relic had grown quiet, its light dim again. She looked at him with sharp eyes. "You are not strong," she said. "You are not trained like us. You cannot fly. You cannot fight like we can. And yet you did this. I hate it. I hate that the relic chose you." Rafi looked at her with calm eyes. "I do not ask you to like it, but maybe one day you will see why." She turned away, her wings folding close to her body. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she spoke in a softer voice. "You confuse me, human. You do not act like a victor. You do not act like a conqueror. That makes me more uneasy than if you had laughed in my face." He gave a small nod. "Then maybe we will learn from each other. I cannot fight like you, but I can stand. And sometimes standing is enough." Vera walked toward the door, but before she left, she turned once more. Her voice carried less anger now, more weight. "Do not think this is over. I will still test you. I will still watch you. But perhaps I will also listen." Then she was gone. Rafi stood alone in the chamber, looking at the relic one last time. He felt no pride, only a strange sense of duty. The images of humans and aliens together still burned in his mind. He knew his life would not be simple anymore. He had stepped into something vast. He walked out into the starlit night of the alien city. The towers rose like dark mountains, and the sky was filled with distant lights of other worlds. For the first time, the alien citizens did not sneer at him. They did not call him weak. They looked at him with new eyes, filled with wonder, fear, and respect. The journey of one man had changed how an entire world saw his people, and in the quiet of his heart, Rafi whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning."